viewers through the 7 clear takeaways that are set to come out of this trade deal. Remember, it has taken 18 years for the talks to actually finalize now, negotiations that have actually been underway since 2007. But now officially that they are being concluded, and this is one of India's longest and toughest trade negotiations that we are now seeing. Duty-free or low duty access that will come about for nearly 90% plus goods. So that is a direct benefit, both sides, that will cut or eliminate tariffs on over 90% of the traded goods, making exports cheaper and more competitive. It will also be a big boost for India's labor-intensive sectors, Indian sectors that are struggling due to high EU duties that are close to 10%, that are now being worked out, and both sides are set to reduce it, especially for the textiles industry, for the garments, leather sector, footwear, gems and jewelry, chemicals, machinery, that are all set to get a major relief and price advantage in Europe. EU will also gain easier access to India's high tariff markets. India's steep duties, especially on the automobile sector, which is 35.5%, plastics, chemicals, pharma, machinery, that will all see a reduction, and this will be a big win for EU manufacturers as well. Services, trade that will open up, the FTA liberalizing rules in IT, telecom, accounting, transport, business, services, all these areas where India is globally strong and the EU is a large buyer. Trade diversification, of course, and that is a huge factor for both India and EU, because this also means looking away from US and China shocks, with the US now imposing 50% tariffs and global trade getting disrupted. This deal that will give India huge stability, an alternative market, and reduction over reliance on China-linked supply chains. EU is India's largest goods trading partner, current goods that trade at about $136.5 billion. The services trade that amounts to $83 billion. Now, this deal that will massively deepen an already massive relationship and is expected to multiply trade and investments. Let me take this back to my colleague Pranay Upadhyay, who continues to report from outside Hyderabad House. Pranay, most importantly, how this can set as a precedent for the West, given the global trade disruption we see over the imposition of high tariffs by the US, how the US is actually monitoring this development as India and EU near the finalization of this trade deal. Because I also want to refer to a statement that has been made by Scott Bessent, who said that Europe is funding war against itself.
You're absolutely right, Soyasha. This is not only a trade agreement, this is also a geo-economic and a geopolitical statement that it's not India who's playing difficult, it's not or European Union who's playing difficult or unfair. This is how the conclusion of economic partnership agreements are being done. This is a statement that how the sensitive sectors, both economies, will try and protect their economically sensitive sectors. Here, both Europe and European Union and India have decided to leave the sensitive sectors and agree on the commonality of the factors. How we can agree on certain points where there is a maximum consensus. So the objective is to maximize the consensus and to minimize the differences here. And that's why agriculture, dairy and some of the other sectors, even in the automobile sector, as Chetan was mentioning, the tariff duty reduction will be a very gradual and in a phased manner, because India also has a robust automobile sector and we have to protect our automobile manufacturers as well. And therefore, on one side, we want to open up our economy, give more market access to European brands, but also we want to protect our manufacturers as well. So therefore, this is for the Washington DC to draw its inferences how they want to deal with India. But we have seen in the past, even in the bilateral trade agreement India concluded with the United Kingdom, it took a lot of time. It took over 3 years of time and a very meticulously done trade negotiation wherein both India and United Kingdom concluded. India-EU FTA, you mentioned that how it took around 20 years to conclude, and how meticulously these trade negotiations were done and concluded. There is a sincerity of effort to conclude a trade deal, but also there is a sensitivity and a mutual respect towards the sensitivity of each other's concern and the markets, because Europe also respected that India's agriculture sector has large number of population dependent on it. Dairy is a sensitive sector for India, and India want to protect its dairy and agriculture sector or fishery sector, and therefore Europe has excluded it. And likewise, in terms of the food products, in terms of the food processing related items in European market, there is a Mercosur deal, in Europe. And post Mercosur deal, there are protests which are still on in European markets and on European streets from the European farmers. So there is a mutual sensitivity on either side as far as the agriculture and dairy sectors are concerned. But here, as you rightly mentioned, that this is for the Washington DC to draw its inferences and conclusions that how they want to deal with the global trade order. But the Scott Bessent statement you pointed out regarding India or European Union fueling the Russian war machine against Ukraine. If you go by the same logic, then US is also trading with India, and over $100 billion trade is being done between India and United States. So if you go by the same logic, then can one say that US is funding the Russian war machine? Because if US is giving money to India in exchange of some trade or some exports, then same money is being used to purchase the Russian oil. And this is how the US economy or US treasury or US taxpayer money is going to Moscow. Then this is very impossible to do trade if we try and link the trade and geopolitics in such simplistic terms, because you have to see how the trade negotiations and trade partnerships are to be curated and be over the course of time. With the World Trade Order or with the World Trade Organization led global trade order, we have built a system in this globalized world to have mutual linkages, mutual partnership, and what is being done here between India and EU through this FTA is not only building a partnership in terms of the goods and services, but also a partnership and an intertwined linkage between the supply chains. Like India is producing pharmaceutical products, but for pharmaceutical products, a lot of heavy machinery is being imported from Europe, and that generic drug which is produced in India through the pharma sector is then exported to European market. So there is an interdependence, there is a logistic supply chain dependence, and this is how the intertwined system works. That both India and EU economies are trying to link their economic system. They are trying to create a greater good for both the economies here.
Oh yes, absolutely, Pranay, and I request you to stay on with us.